let's get started. So 6:37, calling the meeting to order. First on the agenda is the acceptance of the previous minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review those that wants one? And are there any changes that we need to make to them?
I didn't see any. They
I
looked
didn't see
fabulous.
anything.
I agree with that. They looked fabulous. Very nice job, Mark. Can I get a motion to accept them?
I will make a motion to accept the minutes.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And they are accepted unanimously, unless you were going to. Any opposed?
No.
They are accepted unanimously. So the next on the agenda is the open session and call for public comments. Not seeing any members of the public present, we are going to move forward. So the next one is the review of the background. I guess before we hop into that, we have a member joining us who was not at the previous meeting. So just to run down the list here, my name's Christopher Monroe. I'm the representative from the planning board. And Katie?
Oh, sorry. I'll go next. I'm Katie Young. I am the rep from the select board.
I'm Keith Tatro. I am the rep from the Ag Committee.
I'm Kathy Hansgate, member at large.
Mark Kresge, member at large.
Well, welcome to the committee and thank you for volunteering. So, returning to the agenda, the first item is review of background materials collected by members. And I have to start by saying I forgot to send out the letter that came back from the Attorney General that you had asked for, Kathy.
Okay.
The one on the bylaw, and
Yeah.
I will give that back to myself as an action item.
The
Okay.
one from Rutland.
No, when the Attorney General shot down our development, rate of expansion development.
Oh, I thought that was on there.
I didn't find it.
Okay.
Yeah, if it is, somebody else put it there. I definitely forgot to add it. So,
Some kind of letters on there. I forget what it was now.
so I guess the first place we should go with this is to talk about what we currently have, what each of us have added, and why we think it's important. So, probably the let me make sure I have the right stuff here. Okay, so I guess before we go into that, has everybody been able to get into the Google Drive?
Yes.
I have not checked. So
Okay.
I got
don't-
into it and I'm not sure, I clicked on and only saw, I guess it was agenda that was posted. Was there other materials posted?
Yeah, if you looked right when I created it, that would have been the only thing that you saw, but now you should see 6 folders. They should be drafting tools, examples, meetings, resource info, state law and regs, and town data.
Okay, so I used the original
Maybe.
logon
Yep.
that you sent me, so it didn't have any of the, when I logged on today, it didn't show me any updates.
Okay.
All right, so I will.
Refresh, maybe?
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
send out
okay,
another.
No, that's fine.
I'll send out another invitation to make sure
it's
that you
just
get the right
my-
stuff.
I got on, I logged
Okay.
on.
All right.
Keith may not be able to get in because you've got him with his CharterNet email address.
Okay. Well,
Unless you've got a separate logon.
I
to
will double
Google.
check your TV. I will double check your email address when we're not broadcasting that address on TV.
okay,
Do some good stuff. Come on.
I do have the email.
Okay, you do have
I
it?
just
Okay, so then you should
haven't
be able to
gotten
get
that
it.
far yet.
All right, so I'll
and-
just refresh and try again.
Yep. And the reason for doing that is some of these documents are pretty big. Some of them are very large PDFs, and having them all in one place instead of having to print out 300-page packets for everybody is just going to be easier for us. While we're on the topic, there's one more member we haven't connected with. I think is it Brian?
Yeah, I asked Lori today when I saw her if he had been sworn in, because our first meeting he wasn't sworn in for, but he couldn't make that meeting
Okay.
today. But I asked her today, and she said that he was sworn in.
Okay.
So I'm unsure why, other than maybe the email didn't go out until today. Not trying to throw you under the bus, but he might have not have known
Yeah, I'll reach out.
because he
And
wasn't at our
connect.
first one. So
Okay. Okay, I will follow up. Okay, so back into the background materials collected by members. So I added a whole bunch of stuff into the town data folder based upon work that the planning board has done, open space has done, and a couple other committees in town to get everybody on the same page. Because one of the things that I'm sure you've heard me throw around are some of these numbers on like the amount of land that's developable and some of the other statistics on land usage. And the source from those is almost entirely the housing plan that got loaded into the folder. The housing plan was done with MRPC a couple generations of the planning board ago to look at what the current land use was in town and make recommendations about ways to go. Now, the recommendations out of that plan aren't necessarily useful to what we're doing, but there's a lot of demographic information that's useful in terms of how many acres are for this and how many acres are for that. That's, to the best of my knowledge, the most current that I've seen in any of the town file systems. I don't know if you've seen a more current survey of that.
I'll take a look at it. I know generally my data is more accurate than MRPC's is,
Well,
but
MRPC is currently updating our master plan, and that's something that we all should know. It is about to go in front of the planning board for another draft review. Once I get a full copy of it, I'm going to share the draft version with everybody on this committee. It is a publicly available document for anybody who wants to get a copy of it. But it's going to be important for our decision making too, because it has a lot of that same information, and one of the top recommendations that came from MRPC is that the town needed to do what we're doing here, where it at least needed to look at that and investigate it as an option for the town. So there's a few other things that are in that folder. There's also the list of Chapter 61 properties. There was some new information that was added today that I'm sure we're going to talk about a bit more about the cost of services for specific classes of land. For example, and I guess just to run through it without using actual numbers, and these are not actual numbers, but residential, when you have residential land usage, there's a cost of delivering services to that land per acre that you can figure out. And it usually ranges between 102 and 106. Open space is much cheaper, commercial is much cheaper, and what that means is that for every dollar of tax revenue you bring in, you're actually paying more money out for the services on that residential property as opposed to commercial or agriculture, and so on and so forth. So that's going to be a pretty meaningful document. The other thing that I put in here, because I think it's going to be helpful in terms of validating what we're doing, is the survey that we did for the master plan, and by we I mean the planning board. And that survey was sent out to everybody in town to ask them what they valued, what they thought was important, what they wanted to see for the future. I encourage everybody to go in and look at that, because it should be a guiding principle in terms of what we do. It's not going to be super surprising. For the most part, everybody in town wants to do things that are going to tend towards lower taxes, but preserve the aesthetic and the agrarian nature of the community.
when was that survey done?
2021,
Okay.
June 17th.
So, yeah, so just this past go around.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's in this active master plan
Okay.
planning cycle.
All right.
So now there is some bias to it, and this has been something that I've pushed back on MRPC for, in terms of the way they ask questions, where it can potentially skew some of the results. And like a good example of that is cluster zoning. Cluster zoning, whenever they do these tests, it always surveys, comes up really, really unpopular. And I think it's because if you just pick people off the street, 9 out of 10 are going to be like, cluster zoning? That sounds like city stuff.
Yes.
So I take a look at the questions and think critically about those things, because I think there are some problems in the data. And that's just one example of it. But overall, I believe it's good. Even though there are some problems in the data, it's better than just, yeah, I think this is what the town wants. Because not scientifically valid data, but still data. Does anybody have any questions about any of that town data we're looking at, or have any ideas on other things we should be targeting before we start talking about policy implications at our next meeting?
I don't think there was any other surveys done recently on this kind of stuff.
No, there wasn't.
Yeah, like there's some from before, but that's, yeah.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, I'm good. What do you?
It's fine with me.
We'll get you into it, and if you look at it and you're like, this makes no sense, we'll plan around the next meeting.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I'll take a look at the survey from last year and compare it to the one before that, that's in the open space plan, because that was like a year or two earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they don't overlap entirely,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
I'll
They might.
post it.
We also have the option of putting together our own survey and running it if we want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the reason I hesitate to do that, because to really do a good job with it, you have to have it open for probably 30 days or so. And a lot of this has already been done, so I don't see the need to reinvent the wheel. If anybody feels strongly about that, I don't want to make the decision single-handedly.
I think the survey from last year is good enough.
Okay.
It's recent. It's not like it was 6 years
Yeah,
ago.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's recent.
Okay, so any other questions on just the town data section? We're going to look at the other folders. Okay. So the next one is examples, and there are only a couple local examples of what people have done with this type of bylaw, and specifically Rutland and Bolton. And there's 3 documents in the folder. One of each of the bylaws are represented, but the one that I would like everybody to pay particular attention to is the slide deck that goes along with the Rutland bylaw, because they actually put together a PowerPoint presentation to talk about what their methodology was. And to some degree, we're mirroring their process a little bit. We're doing things Hubbardston's way, but in terms of coming up with goals on what we would like to see the town do, and then filling in with a process, essentially the same way. Does anybody have any questions on those, or know of any other local examples that we should be looking at?
I don't know of any.
I ran Harvard had a proposal. It was never brought to a vote, as far as I know. I'll take another look at it and see if they. I don't think they even got to drafting language, but they may have had something similar to the Rutland slide deck about process and issues and things like that.
I do like the PowerPoint. I think this PowerPoint needs more pictures, though.
Yeah.
I'm dead serious. Like, you got to show, like, because people have a hard time visualizing, and sometimes they visualize negatively compared to a positive visualization, you know? So it's like one of those, yeah, a good picture can go a very long way. You know, not that I guarantee anything, you know, somebody will do exactly that, but, you know, to give them people have a hard time picturing things unless you give them an example.
Yeah.
I've always found that, you know?
I agree.
Yeah, it is nicely informationally dense, and it does have a lot of citations to the points that they raise. So when they throw out facts about why agritourism is a good thing, they give you citations that show in a published, scientifically valid way. Well, mostly scientifically valid way.
Mostly. Close enough.
So yeah, those are really good resources. I suppose just to really make sure we do this thoroughly, I'm going to send a message to our regional planning authority and to the Wachusett Planning Authority to see if there's any others that they're aware of that we might be missing. And I'll report back on that. Okay, so the next one down the list is the state laws and regs. So what we did is we pulled in the statutes that we talked about at the last meeting, and we also put in the bill that's currently pending. And I guess to briefly talk about that, bill. So yeah, that absolutely impacts what we do as a matter of philosophy, but it's also kind of the floor of where we want to end up potentially, because it says, well, this is where your minimum needs to be. Then us as a town have this whole area above it to work with. So, and just for those people following at home, it is Senate Bill number 2643. And it came up at the last meeting for discussion, being something that we should look at. So we did get a copy of it and load it into the share folder for the committee to review. So does anybody else have any other statutory sources they think we should be looking at, or places we should be reaching out to collect data on that?
If you want to get out of Massachusetts, there are state level statutes in New Hampshire and Vermont. But I think in Massachusetts that we've got it covered.
Okay. So there's another folder that was resource info, and it appears to have some of the guides from out of state.
Yeah, those are all kind of deep dive planning documents on all the issues revolving around agritourism and such.
Indiana.
Yeah.
They do have pretty pictures, some of them do.
Well-
So you can, I mean, you're not going to sit down and read these things in detail, but if you wanted to skim them, then
Yeah.
you might
All the fun
do
pictures.
that just to see if there's anything of interest.
I mean, I'm going to read them in detail, but
Yeah,
little
but
different.
you're not normal.
but so yeah, I agree with that and think that makes sense. It's a resource. We should look at it. The same thing with New Hampshire and Vermont. There is some Vermont information in there. It's good background to know what other people are doing, because my position generally when looking at any kind of bylaw or zoning revision is it's not good to have to cut from cloth. It's not good to have to start from scratch. We're in a tough spot because not a lot of people have done this. And we also have some peculiar zoning rules that we're going to have to take into account. So there isn't a template we can just take off the shelf. We can't just steal from another community. Arguably, some of the Rutland stuff we can, but it still doesn't fit perfectly. So there's no way getting around having to do some draftsmanship on it. But knowing what other people have done is a lot better than just making it up yourself. All right, so that is all of the information we currently have in the share drive. So I have a couple items that I'm going to do. I'm going to check in with the 2 regional planning authorities, and I am going to load in the Attorney General letter. Anybody else have anything else on that?
Under the Chapter 61A properties for agricultural land, I looked at that list, and there are 11 other folks that have horses or other types of agricultural. I'm not sure if they're considered hobby farms or not in all cases, but there's 11 other properties that are not on the list that are actively doing something in agriculture. More than just, I've got a horse in my backyard, or I've got
Yep.
chickens in my backyard, not those. But
Like selling eggs at the end.
they rent stall space, they give riding lessons, and
Yeah. I bet you there's more than 11.
I-
I bet you. Looking at this list, there's more than 11.
Maybe.
Sorry, not to,
So
I
thi-
don't want to contradict you, but.
This is
But
something that I
found
think.
I came
yes.
up with 11.
Yes, yeah,
That were not on the list.
for sure, in other words.
So this is something that I think is going to turn out to be pretty important for us, because one of the main questions that we have to answer is, what are we setting as a threshold? Are we saying something is an agricultural accessory use if it is 25% the income of the main agricultural purpose? Is it 50%? Are we finding some other yardstick or measure where we're doing it by the percentage of land? Because we want to do something that has meaningful impact. And like, for example, the state guidelines, and correct me if I'm wrong, they were saying that it had to be 25% of the agricultural business to qualify for what they were trying to set up. So 25%, when you start talking about some of these smaller farms, they can have an agricultural accessory use in the single digit thousands, and I don't think we're doing a lot to help people with that, or anything that's going to have a long-term impact on land usage in the town. So I think we're going to have to look and see what is actually going on out there in order to make sure we set it correctly and not just pull a number arbitrarily. So we had talked a little bit about putting together a list, and I believe you were going to look in and see if it was something that was possible to do, of who's actually doing what for farms, in addition to the 61A list.
Well, that's where I came up with 11 more that was not on that list.
Okay. So do you have that for us then, I guess?
I thought I did, but it's home on my desk.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, I'm one.
Yes, you're one. You're not,
I'm
he's
one.
not on there.
Well,
Correct.
Yeah.
can you email it to me and I will add it to the group share?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought I brought it with me.
That's okay.
I goofed.
No problem.
It happens.
Can you explain to me what the need for the threshold is in regards to what we're
Bylaw.
trying to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, okay, yeah, I'll let you go first.
Okay, so what we're and really how this all started is it got there's been people in town talking about it for years, and also recently it got recommended that we needed to look at allowing agricultural accessory uses as part of our zoning. And the reason that word accessory becomes important is because if you're talking about something as an agricultural accessory use, you structure it in something like what these towns have done, where you're saying, well, you can just do these certain things by right, you can do these certain things by site plan, these certain things require a special permit. Now, if you don't tie it to the agriculture and it's not an accessory use, then you're talking about just changing the rules we have for our zoning districts. So in town, we kind of have 3 different levels of zoning. As a practical matter, you can argue it's 2. We have the town center district, which is completely gobbled up by the commercial zone. And then we have residential agricultural zoning. And residential agricultural zoning is the overwhelming majority of the town. The commercial district only runs from the corner there up to around John's Automotive or so.
Right.
Then everything else is out of it. So what you can do outside of the commercial zone, I believe, and MRPC and a decent other amount of other policymakers believes is currently more targeted towards residential than actually being residential agricultural zoning, because there's a lot of things that a lot of our farm enterprises in town are currently doing because they need to survive, and because it is appropriate from a business standpoint, that aren't technically within our zoning and are either a violation of the zoning, violation of the permit. I don't want to get into any kind of specific examples because we're at a televised meeting, and because it's not appropriate for us to do that as a board. But that's why it's linked that way, because it's also an easier it is an easier thing for the townspeople to digest at a town meeting if we're talking about making a zoning change for a couple specific things, as opposed to doing a comprehensive review of our zoning scheme for the town. which is arguably something we need, but is a long way from happening.
So I'm just trying to understand what the threshold as a percent of business or a dollar amount is what we're looking at. Because again, a business may be doing $1,000 and 999 of it is in an outside accessory or ancillary use. Or a business may be doing $200,000 and that particular whatever you want to call it, service, business use may only be $2,000 of that business. So that's why I'm just
Yep.
trying to understand what we're trying to do with that
So-
threshold.
So it's kind of a counterpoint to what I think a lot of us think. We're here you don't join this committee if you're not fairly pro agriculture. So when we look at that kind of situation, it was like, oh well, it's just a farm doing it. It's just a farm making money. Other people who might be critical of what we're doing come in and say, okay, when does it stop being a farm and start being this other thing? So like an example that came up recently that was really, and still is controversial in the town, is wedding venues. So if you have a farm that makes $10,000 a year cutting hay, but then you have a wedding venue that makes $500,000 a year, do you have a wedding venue or do you have a farm? And that is an actual material question of law and fact. So we're trying to figure out where it's appropriate for us to recommend the line end up for that, because maybe there is a situation where that makes sense to be a farm. Maybe there's a situation where it doesn't make sense, but that's something for us to debate when we get a few more steps down the road. Does it make sense from that standpoint?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure whether you were talking about goals yet tonight.
Yep.
Because from my perspective, we need to be painting with a much broader brush than simply agriculture accessory use.
That is the next
But-
agenda item. So we're going to go on to that next if there's no other questions on the information together. All right, so let's move on to that next. And the way I envision this happening is, like I mentioned in the email that I sent out, I would like if everybody could give a few goals that they think this committee should have, or at least what your personal goals are for this committee and the impact that you believe allowing this kind of uses for farms, whether it's accessory, whether it's something that's different, whether it does turn into a little bit broader zoning reform, but what you would like to do. So just to give an example to start with, I'll give mine first. So I guess most important to me is we need to encourage types of development in this town that cause us to have a sustainable budget, where we have people and businesses that are doing things that are going to make it so that our budget doesn't collapse in 5 to 10 years, which, depending upon which projection you look at, is a real possibility, especially with the growth that's been in the school system. I think that for me, that's number one. The next thing is I really like the character of this town, and I would like to encourage agricultural businesses to fill in a lot of the business voids, as opposed to just creating a much larger commercial zone. I guess I have two. No, and the third, I suppose, and it relates to the second, is it promotes open space. I really like open space. I like to hike. I like to mountain bike. And when you have agricultural businesses, they tend to have easements for trail use. They tend to preserve the woods, and those help the things that I like to do stay a thing in this town. So that's my three reasons. I also grew up in Hudson and Berlin, and I guess from an added standpoint is looking at Berlin, they kind of faced this situation maybe 20, 30 years ago, and I don't think they did it right. Because Berlin came in and was like, no, everything is always going to be 2 acres with 200 yards of frontage, and we are not going to allow any business. We're going to allow no business. It is now entirely a suitcase community, except for a couple decent-sized bedroom community,
Yeah.
except for a couple horse farms. And it's really kind of a shame because they had a last clear shot to try to save some of those businesses, and they didn't do it. So that's my 3 and my side. So who would like to go next?
I want to go.
Katie?
The wild one of the group. So first of all, I do like your 3, and I have absolutely no problems with your 3. I would like to add to those 3. First of all, I want to try to save and possibly reclaim some of the farms that we have in this town. There used to be a lot more. They're kind of dwindling. There's a lot of barns around that used to have not necessarily, stuff for sale and, business-minded farms, but there were farms nevertheless that are not there anymore. I would love to make it easier and more, not necessarily lucrative, but more, like a prettier picture to come to Hubbardston and build a farm. This is where you want to do it. You want to reclaim the land. You want to be able to live on your farm and be able to make money and not have to, man, I live on this farm and I work a job and my husband works a job and then we got to come home to take care of these animals. What were we thinking? Why would we own a farm? That should never be in the realm of a farmer. Yet, that is the absolute realistic most realms of most farmers. There's adults, they all work separate jobs, they have to come home and do the farm. I think it's wrong, and I want to make it easier and more attractive for people to reclaim the farms that aren't here and to work the farms that are still kind of hanging on, so they don't go to the way of divvying them up and making houses. The other thing I would like is I would love to see more business being at the farms, and some people freak out when they hear the word business, but like the winery having a tasting room or the wedding venues, I am a fan of that. I know some people are like, oh, it gets too big, and then where does that business become not the farm? But at the same time, you're still encouraging the farming. Look at, and my perfect example, or I got a bunch of perfect examples. Look at Hardwick Winery. Look at the brew over there, Stone Cow, and look at the corn maze over in Sterling, the Davis Animal Farm and Mega Maze. They're raking it in hand over fist. They're still farming though. Their root of their stuff is still farming. Just because they do a corn maze and they have the barbecue and they have the family orientated stuff and they do the animal farm and stuff like that, doesn't mean they're still not a farm. They're still a farm. And yes, they're making a lot of money, but that's also money that's coming into the town. And you can't tell me it's not. That's income that's coming into the town. Even just the people driving out there have to stop and get gas or have to stop and get that. That's also money coming into the town. It's all these extras. The same with the wedding venues, all these extras that might happen to crop up with Airbnbs, or if some of these farms did some kind of tenting, yurts, things like that. Then you get into a little slippery slope there, but that's my other thing is I'd love to see some of these farms turning into an experience.
An educational.
Yes. It could be educational. It could be a quiet. Hubbardston used to be a destination retreat for Boston folks, city folks. They come out here and rest and recoup and relax, and it was their vacation. We could be again. God forbid we were known for being a beautiful land filled with farms and open space, and people came and spent their money here. God forbid. I mean, we don't want loud partying things, but again, it's Hubbardston, so it's not going to be like Hampton Beach or Lake Tahoe. You know what I mean? We're not a destination like that. But if we were a wedding destination or a peace and quiet out in the woods in a yurt destination, I can see that for Hubbardston, and those are some of my views personally. I think that was more than 3, but sorry, I'll shut up now. Pretty sure that might have been 4, 5, 6, kind of rolled all into one.
So where I'm going with this exercise is this is also going to help. This is going to be essentially the first slide in the deck when it comes time to present this to the rest of the town and to talk about why we did what we did. So that's why I want us to do this particular exercise. So
On my end, I came up with one, but it kind of ties into what you're saying. A clear and concise list of what's acceptable activities on a farm or agricultural zoned land or business in town. As a farmer cannot make it growing corn or wheat or anything in this town. Just doing that. Agritourism has become the way that a farm can survive. I spend more time on my farm doing farm work, working with people, etc., than my real job, but the real job is what pays the bills. Being able to do more with the farm would bring more people into town, would bring more money into town. And you can't, it's not a one-for-one situation, because this person's not going to spend a penny in town and that person's going to spend $500 before they leave. But basically on my end, I would like to be able to say, these are the things that I can do, or you at your farm can do, or whoever on their agricultural land or commercially, whether it's changing the verbiage there. Again, I'm not a lawyer speak person. I'm kind of a go out and do person. So I'll cross lines, I promise, as far as that goes. But I'd like to see what's right for the people in Hubbardston and what's right for the people that are trying to make a dollar with the land in town.
that's an awesome point. Being a lawyer speak person, I didn't even see that as an issue. So that's an awesome ad, because you're thinking about it after what you said. Yeah, it is really confusing. Like looking at our zoning and what's allowed and what, it's confusing.
With what, one of the first things I did when I came to Hubbardston 12 years ago was talk with the building inspector and what can I do on my property. And I don't think I've done anything outside of that. And again, farming is not an easy way to make, it's a way to make a living, but it's not an easy way to pay for things. And, the opportunity to share that with people, is more than what the money is worth. But, for example, I had the Monty Tech freshman vet tech students out to the farm last Friday and got to only spend 6 hours with them. For those who know I can talk.
Yes. You think I can talk? He can talk. When we get together,
But
forget it.
I didn't make a penny from that. Should I have allowed those people on my farm? I don't know, and that's kind of why I'm here, as far as that goes.
Yeah, that is excellent feedback to add in.
Well, to add into what's already been said, one of the goals that I thought we should have is that we want to protect the farmer and his and her rights. That kind of is a short version of what you just said. When I moved here 11 years ago, I contacted the Mass Farm Bureau for what the rights were that the state had for farms, and then followed those. Fortunately, pretty much parallels anything that we have listed in the town at this time. So, but there's some things I might have tried that would not meet the qualifications of the current bylaws. And again, I don't farm to pay all the bills with the farm, because I started older. But because I was older, we had the money to buy the property. And that's a real big issue with getting people back on properties to reclaim them as farms. And even the state of Massachusetts is currently addressing that issue right now. And they've done Zoom meetings and are working up a plan to try and help make that more possible. On the second goal, like he said, is, he had students over. The number of farmers in the United States, percentage-wise, is so small that the more education that we can give back to the community, to the children and adults, and whether that means agritourism or not, that's vital for our country to have enough farmers in the future to even think about dreaming of producing all our own food. The United States farmers have not produced all their own food since 1998 or 9. If we got cut off from the rest of the world, people would start going hungry. And so we need to have the rest of the world understand that farming is complicated, farmers are smart and educated, and it's a hard job. And the ones who like it, like we do, you do it anyways. But it would be nice to see it benefit a wider base of the community.
So you're saying Walmart doesn't grow their own food? That's not where this comes from? But seriously, no, I totally agree.
Look
Totally
on the
agree.
labels as to where
Oh, I
those
know.
little sticky things that we
Uh-huh.
pull off, what country of origin the food is from.
Mexico. Well, some of it.
A lot of
Yeah,
places.
yeah, I know. Oh, I
You
know.
start
All over the
looking.
place. All over the place.
Yeah. And that's an issue.
Those are all very good points. So lastly,
Well, I'm pretty sure we have the same two primary goals, just couched in slightly different terms. But the two things I'm trying to accomplish are, one, to support landowners that have farms, working land, open space land, and make it possible for them to retain the land in that state by creating potential revenue streams that allows them to do it economically. I'll expand on that because I think we're going to be missing the boat if we say that we're only talking about farmers. Certainly farms are part of what we're aiming at. But if you look at the stats, the privately owned land in town, 80% of the privately owned land is in parcels greater than 5 acres. Only 30% of that is currently enrolled in 61A or 61, which would be the properties that would probably be considered to have agriculture as a primary use. That means we've got another 50% of the private land in town that is in larger parcels, is probably contributing to the rural character of the town. but is not agriculture per se. So that's why I say I think we need to be painting with a broader brush. I mean, I'm using the term agriculture as kind of a shorthand. It's a lot easier than saying agriculture, working lands, or other activities that contribute to the rural character of the town, or that don't conflict with the rural character of the town. So that's one level, supporting individual landowners. And then the other primary goal is what you also referred to, the general economic health of the town. When 99% of the town is in rural agriculture zone, our economic opportunities are limited. To the extent that we can define economic opportunities that can occur on these lands that don't conflict with people's vision of what the town is, I think we need to be doing that.
So you bring up something that I expect is going to be something that we end up talking about a bunch, because it relates to what we talked about for a definition of agricultural accessory use, and what that potentially means, and whether we need to do something that's a bit different from that. And I've spent some time thinking about that, but I think we need to discuss it as a committee, and I'm going to put it on the agenda for the next meeting, in terms of what we believe our strategy should be. And by that, I'm specifically meaning we're making a recommendation. We need to figure out how that recommendation is going to play out in the bigger scheme of things. Like, it could be possible that we say, hey, this is what we recommend for right now. This is what we recommend doing in the future. So we take kind of a bits and pieces approach. It could also be possible that we come in and we swing for the moon and we say, hey, this is what you need if you want to really make an impact on this right now. And the reason that becomes a strategy and it becomes something that we should talk about and we need to deliberate on is because we need to talk about, well, what do we think is going to be likely to pass? What do we think is going to work at town meeting? What do we think the public wants? What do we think the public is going to support? So, yeah, we absolutely, there's bigger pieces than just the agricultural accessory. And I think we're going to want to spend some time thinking about that before the next meeting and come in and deliberate on what we think is going to be pragmatic for that. On whether or not we're going to be a one big try at it, or if we're going to be take kind of a phased approach, or bits and pieces, and say, hey, we are confident that we can pass these particular reforms as they relate to agriculture and as they relate to agritourism. But we also recommend that you look into these recommendations for ecotourism, where, yeah, it might be lots where the primary purpose is not agriculture, but it's ecotourism consistent with what we're trying to do with agritourism. And I think there's a pretty, I don't want to jump ahead, but I think there's a pretty high likelihood we end up that way. And I want to give everybody time to think about it. So I think it should
So
be
you're talking
full,
about, like, the other ones would be for the ecotourism, you're talking more like open space and how it relates into, okay, I just want to make that I want to make sure I'm on the same page as what the hell you're talking about.
does that make sense with what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the open space ties in with and how.
Yeah, no,
get what
and
you're
that's
saying.
completely right. And well, there's also, I don't want to jump into the deliberation now, but and I don't know how we find data that shows this one way or another on the effectiveness of these bylaws for pulling properties and parcels back into agriculture. because the Rutland one is fairly new, and you can point to a few
Yeah.
examples, but
Yeah,
I don't
not
think
con-
you can find any kind of trend data.
No.
I doubt it.
Yeah.
No.
You can't point to a bunch of successful businesses, like
No.
what's going on with Barry and Stone Cow and like those
Yeah,
things, but
no.
not so much for Rutland.
No, but you could maybe go with the potential of, say
Or-
there was, like with lowballing it, for even a lowball number, if we had 3 farms open up with X types of businesses,
Mhm.
we could get in this amount of revenue. Now imagine if they were a little bit bigger or there was 6 farms. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And kind of multiply it by that so you can see the low impact that most farms have, even if they had something larger like the Jesus, why do I always forget that place's name? The corn maze. Yeah,
Davis.
Davis Animal Corn Maze. Granted, it is very busy for 3 months at the most out of the year, right? It's crazy busy, but it's not crazy busy as in, like 495 crazy busy. It is crazy busy, maybe like I wouldn't even put it for a Rieta Sunday for the amount of traffic, because people come in, they park, and they stay, and then they get out and they leave. So you do have cars on this side little tiny back road. So it, like anyone that lives in that area, yeah, you will see a little bit of traffic, but not crazy enough that it's gonna cause major upheavals with like you can't get out of your driveway. Like I lived right next to Rieta growing up. Yeah, you can't get out of the driveway Sunday morning. You just can't.
Yeah.
You can only go this way. Don't even try to go that way. So it was something you learn to live with because it's Rieta and it's a business and it's only a couple hours once a week during the summertime. You just learn to live with it. And I'm not saying people should have to learn to live with a farm next door that is creating like an upheaval, but I can't see even a wedding venue. They all come at once. They sit there. They do their wedding thing. Then they all leave.
Yeah.
It's not, and it's not like, Monday mornings, when you're trying to get to work. It's like usually weekend stuff at farms and things like that during the summer. So I don't think it would be a tremendous impact. And we could, maybe check around to the other farms to see how much of an impact, like for traffic that they get on a given day, even Stone Cow or the winery out in Harvard when they do one of their festivals or something, when it's like a bigger event. Worst case scenarios. I can't see it being hard, but I can see the dollar amount coming in offsetting any upheaval that might be, like you're trying to put people's fears at bay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you want to bring those fears right up. This is what's going on other towns. This is the numbers. This is what we have to play with. So I would, up front bring up the fears and address it.
Yeah. We'll certainly have to work with those with the long-term strategy. So I guess to talk about what we're going to put on the agenda for the next meeting, it's going to be to talk about our strategy in general on what type of recommendation we want to make. I believe we can do that based upon the information we have and the goals we've just discussed. There's still some process to go through, but I think we have a good enough foundation of stuff that we can point back to and say, these are the goals we talked about. This is the information I'm grounding this in. This is why I think we should try this or do this. And we'll deliberate on whether it's how ambitious we want to be with it. I guess that will be the short of that. Then I would like to deliberate on what we think makes sense for a threshold for Hubbardston. And I think those two will take up pretty much the whole meeting, because I think those will be pretty good discussions. The next thing after that we should look at is the list of activities. Do we want to put that into the next meeting or put that to the meeting after?
I think that's probably gonna have to go one more.
Okay, so we'll put that one more. Okay, so we'll do that. And how about for scheduling the next meeting, still opposite the select board?
Well, we do not have a select board meeting next week. We have one the 11th. So I don't know if everybody wants to do this again next Monday.
What do we all think?
Remind me, I will remind you. Sometimes
Um,
people just need a text.
I guess the question, Monday would work for me. I guess the question is whether or not that's enough time for everybody to be able to take a quick look through some of the materials.
I
Sure.
have no problems doing
It's
that.
okay.
Okay. So let me check the town website. So, in my defense for the last meeting, the finance committee had not published their meeting to the town calendar.
No, it happens. Yeah, because our meeting is the 11th for select board, so I'm assuming which I can double check that shared drive. 4th. I can go in that and go into meeting calendar.
When you talk about establishing a threshold, it's going to depend, I think that's going to depend on what kind of tool you aim at versus influencing what kind of tool you choose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, I think it's going to
Well,
be.
we'll see. We'll see how the conversation goes next meeting, and see if it makes sense to get the thresholds or not.
Why am I not finding the calendar on the website right now?
Where are you going? Go hit home. Meeting calendar.
There we go.
Yeah.
Meeting calendar.
There you go.
All right. So.
So yeah, we have one on the 11th, and then we're scheduled again for the 25th. So we do not have one on the 4th and the 18th at this point in time.
There's March, so we're talking about April, and there is nobody booked for anything on the 4th.
No.
Okay, and that works for everybody? April 4th, 6:30? And we'll plan for the Slade building, so it makes it easier for it to be recorded and such. And I'll get the email out much sooner this time.
6:30.
Okay, so any other matters not reasonably anticipated by the chair? I don't have any. Anybody have anything they want to bring up? Then how about a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to go home and call it a day.
Second.
All for?
Aye.
Any opposed? And we are out of here at 7:30.